So I would like to begin with a special song from Daniel and Abod called One Power.
One power, invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power, indescribable, and you speak of it with every word you say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angels' wings or heaven's door. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power, one power. We speak so many languages, different clothing, different colors, different names. The different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. And we'll remember once we close our eyes to see that such distances were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Hashem or heaven's door. It's Muhammad, it's your mind, it's your soul, or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? Whatever name you give it, it's the very air we breathe. Oh, it's the power of the love in you and me. One power, oh, one power, is what we are. One power, one power. It's the moment of creation. It's an everlasting peace. It's the freedom of forgiveness. It's the sweetness of release. It's the joy of inspiration. It's the sunshine on your face. It's the birthright of all nations. It's the boundlessness of space. It's the beauty of a baby, the serenity of sleep. It's the anger we abandon for its love that's most deep. It's one power, is one power. What we are is one power.
And so it is. As Sandy mentioned in our meditation today, it's traditional that in the first month of the year, we review the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook. And just a warning, there are lots of different covers to the Science of Mind textbook. And the first chapter is The Thing Itself. I like Daniel Nahmod's version better. And when we think about the first chapter being the thing itself, it's not a very warm or attractive call for spirit, or as Daniel Nahmod just so aimly, right on target with all the description he puts into that music about what are we really talking about when we say the thing itself. And I think that Ernest Holmes said the thing itself because he was trying to get us beyond maybe the typical Western thought of God as an anthropomorphic being who judges and punishes, and to get sort of beyond what we might think about regarding human characteristics. The January's theme for all of us here at the center is learning and embodying the Science of Mind principles. And the principles, what is a principle? It's basically a fundamental truth or a foundational basis for a system of belief or a reason, a chain of reasoning. And the principles, of course, are invisible, like the law of gravity is invisible. So you don't see gravity, you don't see these principles, but you certainly experience them in your life every day. Physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. And so it is with principles that we will study in this first 4 weeks. We talk about Science of Mind principles because they become the concept and the foundation for our understanding about spirituality in action. What does that look like in your life? The Science of Mind principles create a framework for this philosophy, this faith, and the way to live a life. So we're going to start with the Science of Mind building blocks. Again, the first 4 chapters, the first one being the thing itself, we'll cover today. John Boyle will be covering chapter 2, the way it works. Sandy Golke will be covering chapter 3, what it does. And Randy and Andy, along with Sandy, Randy and Andy will do how to use it in the 4th Sunday of January. And so we begin with trying to understand, what do we mean about the thing itself? And while the chapter itself, again, not being so appealing, when you actually go through the first chapter of the Science of Mind, he uses so many names for spirit, many even beyond what Daniel Nahmod put in the song, because it's hard to grasp such a big concept. The first sentence of the Science of Mind textbook states, Science of Mind's not a special revelation of any individual person. In other words, he's trying to say, this isn't just Ernest Holmes, don't make me a god. Instead, he says, Science of Mind is a culmination of all revelations, all expressions about the meaning of life. Remember, in the time that Ernest Holmes was actually writing this book in the 30s and 40s, there was becoming more available, readily available translations of the many spiritual texts. So there were new insights and perceptions being revealed through the books that were translated from the East and other places around the world, and people were traveling more. So understanding different cultures, learning different methods and descriptions. For any of you who've studied a second language, If you're learning English, the terms pretty awful sort of don't go together. Pretty awful? What do you mean by pretty awful? And yet, in another language, you would say that differently. In other words, how we literally try to describe the thing itself through the world's eyes. And most of these translations were becoming more available for anybody who wanted to read, rather than just institutions who used to hold this knowledge and distribute this knowledge according to their perspective. And of course, in the 30s and 40s, science was also being more developed and published. We were learning a lot about the field of physics and other scientific fields regarding energy and the invisible side of life. We have even developed more now understanding quantum physics. And you've probably all read something about, is it a wave or a particle? Depends on what? The observer. That is metaphysically a part of the science of mind. Based on how you think, you can affect the demonstrations you see in your life. So Ernest was culminating a way of sharing what was known from this. What is the thing itself? Well, how is that described in other cultures and ways around the world? How does it work? What does it do? How do we use it? And he also contemporarily bridged the culmination of what science was learning and saying, quote unquote, justifying faith in the invisible. So, I know I have many in the community who've been around Science of Mind for a while, and for those that you haven't, you get to hear from others. What are some of the names that Ernest Holmes uses to describe the thing itself? Nature, divine nature. Spirit, source, divine mind, first cause, good, goodness, yes, joy, love, oneness, infinite intelligence, beauty. Now, it's funny you didn't all come up with the same thing, because you're a unique expression of that thing itself. And there are things that sort of just hit your heart when you hear, what am I describing as the thing itself? So let me give you some others. Maybe I'm repeating a few things. Just in the first chapter alone, creative intelligence, changeless intelligence, creative power, invisible essence, eternal thing, eternal spirit, eternal voice. That ultimate stuff and intelligence. The power back of all creation. Universal mind, universal wholeness, universal energy, divine being, oversoul, life with a capital L, love and law, sort of like heart and mind, divine government, and divine nature. Notice that most of these names include some kind of essence, a set of characteristics, as we talked about beauty and joy and peace and power, wisdom. And while the thing itself may not have that soft feeling touch, what Ernest Holmes is trying to do is get us to be more expansive. And at one point later in the Science of Mind textbook, he talks about this present being omnipresent, present everywhere. There is nowhere where God is not. Omniscient, all-knowing. And omnipotent, all-powerful. So last month, Our book of the month was called The Leap, The Psychology of Spiritual Awakening by Steve Taylor. Did anybody read this book? Just curious. Most people were too busy with Christmas, I know. I have found this book very fascinating because it's a psychological perspective from somebody who's in psychology about spiritual awakening. And he literally shares that there are people who have become spiritually awakened but had no framework and thought that they were going crazy. That they didn't have a spiritual tradition, and once they began to awaken, more started to make sense once they had a spiritual framework about what was happening with them. So from the book, he says, some people don't believe in a God who oversees the world and controls its events. Instead, they believe in the concepts of spirit force or energy that pervades the whole world and the whole universe. And the individual spirits interact with this natural phenomena like with the abstract forces or powers that are present. So some examples that I think Ernest Holmes was plucking from, and again, The Leap emphasizes. So what did the Upanishads from the Hindu tradition say about the thing itself? The individual self, known as the Atman, becomes one with the spirit forces that pervades the universe, Brahman. You become aware of your essential nature and the essential nature of all reality as one in union, oneness. The Eastern Tao tradition speaks to the Shi, or the energy of life, that is the fundamental essence of the universe, a spiritual force that gives rise to all things, that flows through all things. So with the Tao, you simply empty and allow it to act through you. And in the Buddhists, they speak about Dharmakaya, merging with the realization of all-embracing love and all-knowing intelligence. And this Buddha nature is latent in all beings. All of these principles have been culminated together into the science of mind philosophy. Now, you'll notice that the Eastern spiritual traditions are a little less centered on an egocentric foundation of a supreme being, more than obviously in the Western traditions or the Abrahamic traditions. Certainly, the mystics, whether we talk about Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, and many others, they embodied the principles of life, capital L. And they demonstrated to us, they walked the talk long before they were known as Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. They were modeling for us understanding the principles of the thing itself. Ernest Holmes says the study of the science of mind is a study of first cause, spirit, mind, or that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff and intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself. So, it doesn't matter what we call it. Whether you call it wholeness, divine love, infinite intelligence, cosmic consciousness, oneness, what we really seek is the deep and profound connection with our souls, small s, with soul, the large S. This is the essence of spirituality. The bringing forth of the best of ourselves by knowing our divine nature, knowing that truth, and then embodying and living that truth. Spirituality in action. Now, I grew up Catholic, but I was not practicing Catholicism when I came here again 30 years ago. And I love the words divine nature when I was learning science of mind. Now, why would that be for me? Because I've always been a nature girl. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I constantly was outside. I can still see and feel the mulberry trees in the front yard and the backyards that I climbed. And I sat in those tree houses. There was no other wood but the limbs that I just sat and hung out after school. I felt very connected to life there. I loved riding my bike, camping, walking, hiking, running, sports, because I just loved being outdoors. I remember even in high school, while I was playing softball and we were done, just laying on the grass and looking at the clouds and the blue sky, just relishing the connection I felt with all of that. I didn't play with dolls much, but I had a Smokey the Bear I was very fond of. My point is that I felt deeply tied to nature. And that was my original connection with spirituality. And I didn't really have or need words for that. So it's sort of hard because the minute we go into words and we try to start describing the thing itself, we sort of get into our head, and that's not just where it's at. It's in our heart. It's in the nature of the connection that we feel we have with life. It's really just to be in that connection. So, being your spiritual director and a minister, your first spiritual exercise for the year, how many are willing? And some of you are saying, I don't know yet. I want you to define a new name for God or the thing itself that you personalize. Take the time to contemplate the essence of being connected to life deeply. Being in the flow, the Tao. Being one with the Brahman. Contemplate that essence and then name it something new. Something personal. Now, you might want to use an adjective and a noun like divine love, cosmic consciousness, infinite intelligence, or something simple like the beloved. Anything that would invite you to connect and court the presence. And plan to use that name consistently throughout the year. Develop that connection with that name. Because whatever you choose, as it becomes personal to you, Spirit will become more personal with you. Because it's really all a mirror. What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So the thing itself may not call you, but get to the essence of what is that thing itself for you. Hello, beautiful. Hello, love. Hello, joy. What is it for you? It's calling you. Now, the first chapter of the Science of Mind also starts to weave into the second chapter, the way it works. And we know that the thing itself is invisible. We've talked a little bit about that. And that its nature is goodness and truth and wisdom and many of the attributes that we mentioned earlier. It's also very creative. Have you noticed that life is creative? whether you like it or not sometimes. It's creative by nature. And it has, yes, an intelligence that acts consistently using a universal law, just like putting seeds into the soil. It doesn't favor any particular person, soul, or being. There are just natural laws. It is not about punishing. There's just natural consequences. Especially if you play sports, you start to understand the laws of gravity, right? And so it is with life. When you understand the principles of life and sort of these universal laws, you can work them by co-creating with spirit. So spirit is both love and law, both heart and mind. Love is the goodness and givingness of life. And law is the way life operates intelligently. So the thing itself is this universal mind. There's only one mind, and we are part of that one mind. The one mind is the creative field that is all-powerful, unlimited, all-loving. It is the thing itself in action. Now, like the wave being one with the ocean, our thoughts are one with the universal mind. So thinking about the waves that are in the ocean and the thoughts that are in the universal mind. Each wave is energy and is unique as it goes through the ocean. So are our thoughts, our energy, and unique going through universal mind. Our thoughts are planted into that creative field or into the ocean of spirit. And again, as we plant our seeds of thought, we reap what we sow. Now, as you all know, you don't see your mind chatter instantly creating things. That could be scary. What would it be like if that happened? Sort of an interesting thought to go on. When we plant our seeds of thought, it's not just about blindly stating our words, although our words do have power. Ernest Holmes states that man can bring into his experience whatever he desires, not by holding thoughts, but by knowing. And he doesn't just mean knowing, he means knowing, as in experiencing the truth and becoming one and living that embodiment of the thoughts based on spiritual truth. That's spirituality in action. So, since the beginning of this creative process of planting seeds of thought in the universal mind is to start with intention and awareness of our union and connection with pure spirit. That is the start, and why we begin in January with the thing itself and the universal mind. And this is also why we do spiritual practice. To practice not just knowing, but walking and talking and embodying the spiritual truth as we live our life. To court this divine presence within us, we start with knowing the truth of our being and we plant our seeds. We align with that spirit and become one experientially. And as Ernest Holmes says, science of mind is deeply spiritual and practical teaching, empowering humanity to rediscover its divinity by practicing the simple power principles of life. And as we court the presence and direct the law by planting the seeds of truth, our limited beliefs are transformed into expansive possibilities. The Center for Spiritual Living is inspiring, empowering, and transforming lives through those principles. So I refer back to Daniel Nahmod, one power. So whatever name you give it, it's one power can't you see? It's the power of love in you and me. Namaste.